I have a confession to make. Hopefully the last thing you saw was me assembling the two case halves and telling you that I planned it to perfection, and I cocked up. I ummed and ahed whether to sort of gloss over it and pretend it never happened, but it did, and I learned a valuable lesson from it. Everything in the planning was pretty good. Everything went together as it should have done. Everything was in the right place, but I made one critical mistake, and that mistake meant it's cost me a week of time. I've had to fall back on an engineer friend again, a chap by the name of Richard, who has saved my bacon for the second time on this. And the mistake I made was one which I was aware could happen, and I thought I'd mitigated against. Now, I don't have an airline, which is, I'm just a guy at home, and it's on my Christmas list, but I've yet to get one. And I was aware that after these cases came back from the blasters, where they had all the paint and grit and grime and gasket material removed, that they, even though they'd been washed, they still had some aggregate sort of floating around in the various pores and corners and stuff. So I washed it out at home using the shower at home, which was fine, and that cleaned out all the grit and crap and horribleness, and all was well in the world. And even days later, before the assembly job, I realised that there was still water hanging out in some of the bolt holes, and a lot of these are blind bolt holes. So I was aware that this was a bad thing, and that ideally I should get an airline and blow them out, but as I've already said, I don't have one. So I very carefully dried the water out of all of the blind bolt holes, and then went ahead and assembled it, safe in the knowledge that I wasn't going to hydraulically lock a bolt in place. However, I missed one, and the one I missed was this one here. And there is a metal locating dowel that sits in there like that, and at the time of cleaning everything out, I hadn't realised, it has escaped my attention, that that was actually a bolt hole, and in the bottom of it was a load of water. And I discovered that after I tried torquing a bolt up, which was fighting me, and I sheared the bolt off. It was literally the last bolt I did, and it sheared off below the line of this, deep down, and it meant I had to disassemble everything I'd just done before the sealant had dried out, and I was left in a situation where I had a bolt stuck in the hole. You can see in there. So there's the hole there, and you can see the helicoil that Richard has put in there for me. But the problem I had was the bolt was in there. I drilled the bolt, put a bolt extractor in it. That didn't work. The 4mm one in the 6mm bolt was in danger of snapping itself, which would have made the problem worse. So I drilled the hole a bit larger, put a 5mm bolt extractor in it, and that chewed the hell out of the bolt that was in there. In actual fact, it damaged the threads that the bolt was in and left it in a right mess. So I used a Dremel tool, and I very carefully, with a diamond tipped tool on it, ground out the bolt that was in there, and that was fine. That all kind of worked, but I'd already damaged the threads down this side of the bolt hole, and in the process of grinding out the remainder of the bolt, the threads that were left in there were iffy at best, and so I was left in a situation where I needed help, and Richard stepped up to the plate. And very cleverly, he took a 10mm rod, machined it in the lathe so it fit in this sort of recess where the locating dowel goes. And because it was on the lathe, he was able to exactly drill through the centre of that to the right size for the drill bit, to then drill out the right size hole for the helicoil. He then drilled it out a bit further and used it as a guide for the tap, so keeping the drill bit central and to retain it from wandering off into the knackered area of the threads, and then helicoiled it, and he turned that round in 24 hours for me, and I owe him, well, I owe him lots, really. I owe him a lot of favours, and I'm very, very grateful to know a guy like that. So the moral of the story is, triple check everything. Don't assume anything. If a bolt's fighting you, don't carry on. I knew in my head that by carrying on and fighting it, there was a risk I was going to break it, and it happened. What I should have done is backed it out, checked the hole, discovered there was water, cleaned it, and put the bolt in, and we wouldn't be here. But a lesson learnt, and hopefully one that, you know, if you're not a mechanic, like I am not a mechanic, you might remember this at some point. So the moral is, don't fight any of your bolts. And the other thing is, since it's come apart, I've actually run a tap down all of the screw holes in here, just to make sure they're clean, and you'd be amazed at how much crap actually still came out on those. So they're nice and clean, and the bolts all run down nicely. And on the bolts themselves, I've run a dye over them, just to make sure that all the threads are nice and clean. And a couple of those are a little bit iffy, and they've come up nicely. So, sorry again, very rambly, but I just thought I'd tell you that I've made a mistake. The mistake has been fixed by a friend of mine. It was an easy mistake to make, but one that was easily avoidable, and hopefully no one else will make the same mistake. I'll get on with it. It's time to reassemble the case halves, or at least it will be when the replacement bolt arrives, which hopefully will be here before Friday. And then again this Friday I can start putting the two halves together again, slowly, patiently, and without error. Anyway, that's me done.